The markets are continuing to be challenging for anyone in the altcoin markets as we have been printing new all-time lows or new cycle lows during the past week. However, there's a shift in market momentum as Ethereum is outperforming Bitcoin. Why is this relevant for my altcoin portfolio? That's what we discuss in this update. The markets haven't been performing well, and it's quite hard to be watching the markets or to be looking up to your portfolio, but there is a slight change as the markets are shifting, and it goes unnoticed as people are still stuck in the bear market PTSD or in the bear market mindset. And this is the period where people are likely claiming that the bull market thesis isn't valid anymore, especially this far deep into the 4-year cycle category. And that we're going to be continuing to be printing new cycle lows, and that it doesn't make sense to be investing into altcoins or into anything else. It's also the period where the Bitcoin maxis are actually the most violent group in the crypto space, as most of them are currently shouting that it's a Bitcoin only market. And that is nothing new. That is something that I've been seeing in the previous cycles as well. That's usually the period where the altcoins are making the actual lows, that it's going to be running back upwards and that the Bitcoin maxis are going to be silenced. They are right though. You can't really invest into altcoins on the long term, but you can do it on the short term. Nonetheless, the markets aren't lying and the Bitcoin dominance has been performing the strongest bull market in history as we continue to go with green candle after green candle after green candle. There is a potential bearish divergence, but that's completely invalid. It continued to print a strong new cycle high for the dominance chart, which is bullish for everything related to Bitcoin. But we can see that there is a very strong inflow in the Ethereum ETF in recent times, which is that in the past 4 to 5 weeks, more than $1 billion in USD has been flown into the Ethereum ETF, which results into an increase of 33% in the total assets locked within the ETF, which feels like there is all of a sudden interest into anything outside of Bitcoin, in this case Ethereum, which then also shows that the amount of ETH that's being staked into Ethereum's network has been reaching new all-time highs. And that is super positive. That's great news. And the question is, what is the reason behind this all? There is a potential case to be made surrounding DeFi and the strength of Circle and all those related entities and the stablecoin bill, making it a lot of sense, which means that in general, the TVL within DeFi is quickly accelerating, making the thesis for DeFi on Ethereum more valid. And this is something that we have been discussing with the founder of Aave in our previous podcast episode, which you can find on the New Era Finance YouTube, which you can find in the description beneath. Now, if we look at the data on DeFi Llama, we can see that the TVL of DeFi or locked in Ethereum is comparable to the status of beginning this year. So there's a slight decrease of the amount of TVL, while the prices of all those assets are down massively. Ethereum, Aave are all down 50% compared to that moment, which still makes it believe that it's a macro-driven correction and that we are about to swing it up fastly. Which means that as we are on the other hand looking to get staking added into the Ethereum ETF, this would make it a more viable reason for institutions to be buying the actual ETF because you can get a dividend out of it. And then the Ethereum ETF is going to be more interesting for all those parties, given the fact that this staking part is going to be approved in the next 3 months. For now, it is postponed, but the likelihood of approval is going to be near 100%, as the ETF analysts have provided a very positive case for the approval of altcoin ETFs, crypto basket ETFs, and more. Now, in recent updates, the SEC has again pushed backwards on the staking ETF, but they didn't say no. They have been pushing it backwards by another 45 days as the applications of Grayscale and Van Eck has been given that notice. Ultimately, it is going to be approved, especially since the Fed and the SEC are cracking down on the entire negative sentiment and saga against crypto, which means that it's very likely that the staking Ethereum ETF is going to be approved in July, and that explains the reason for a lot of upside recently on Ethereum. Now, what does it say in the charts? Let's have a look at ETH on the charts. As previously mentioned, the markets are extremely painful, but the markets are making that rotation. It's called the Ethereum market. And after the Ethereum market, we get altcoin market. So Ethereum has been changing, and that's why we're currently into one. And the key chart for that is the Chinese renminbi versus the US dollar and the correlation with ETH versus Bitcoin. As you can see, if we zoom in a little bit more here, we have been bottoming out on both of these charts in the beginning of April. That was during the Black Monday tariff saga. And after that, we have been continuing to show strength on both of them. And recently, in the past week, we see that the Chinese renminbi is about to continue breaking upwards, while Ethereum versus Bitcoin has been breaking downwards, given the fact that we had the geopolitics taking place in Iran. I'll come back to this in a little bit, but what we do see is that the bottom has been happening in April, and since then, Ethereum versus Bitcoin has been making this upwards move and has been outperforming by approximately 35%. But knowing that the Chinese renminbi continues to break upwards, that also provides an arbitrage trade to be made. So you have a risk that it's not true, but you have an opportunity that it's actually correlated and true. And that's when you want to start stepping into Ethereum at this point, expecting it to follow through with the Chinese price action and then resulting into a massive upwards trade for yourself. And that we're going to be attacking 0.026, which is another 15% price increase. And then we are likely going to get Ethereum towards 3K. Because if we look at the previous price history of the Chinese renminbi compared to the Ethereum price charts, we can see that in previous periods, in this case December 2016, and also in August and September of 2019, the Chinese renminbi started bottoming out, and the Ethereum versus Bitcoin chart started bottoming out. And it's just how heavy the upwards move is going to be for the Chinese renminbi, how heavier the M2 supply in the business cycle will take place as the dollar becomes weaker, and the heavier the price of Ethereum starts to rally upwards. So given that this is such a heavy correlation between the two, it is very likely that Ethereum is going to be outperforming in the upcoming period in the second stage of this year, where it's almost every year that the first 6 months of altcoins is underperforming versus Bitcoin, and the second half is the inverse. Now, if we look at the Bitcoin dominance chart, I previously marked this red area as the bear market area. But as you can see, we are still trending upwards with the Bitcoin dominance. You can't really do much of TA at this point. You just need to analyze the chart and see whether it's overvalued or undervalued. So basically, when the Bitcoin dominance chart goes downwards, that's meaning that you want to be less allocated towards altcoins as the end of the altcoin period is close or is likely to come. While on this point, we can see that the Bitcoin dominance continues to grind upwards, potentially making this bearish divergence here, which means that at this point in time, you want to be fully allocated into altcoins. And before the altcoins start to move, you first need to see Ethereum start to move, because that is meaning that the money from Bitcoin towards Ethereum is rotating. And the moment that Bitcoin breaks 106.5K, it's likely that Ethereum is going to outperform. It's likely that gold is going to underperform. And that is where the money gets into the altcoins. And that is also the reason why, if we're looking at the total 2 chart, which is basically the total market cap excluding Bitcoin, is still approximately 40% down from the all-time high, while constructing higher lows on the lower time frames, indicating that in the coming 6 months we are going to be breaking this upwards towards the all-time high. While as you can see with the total tree chart, we are also making a beautiful support resistance flip, and we are about to see the upwards momentum. But given the comparison between the Bitcoin price, the altcoin prices, or the altcoin capitulation prices, altcoins have been massively underperforming, which is creating a big opportunity leading by Ethereum. Before we continue, it's time for this little bulletin. Are you thinking or preparing yourself for the upcoming bull market? That's the ideal time to be switching towards a new or better exchange. It's the perfect time as the markets are slightly heating up, and that's why OKX has just launched the transfer days, which is a very limited campaign where Dutch users can move their assets to OKX and get rewarded with up to €1,000. And that's a lot. Now, here is how it works. Join the campaign before June the 30th, so you only have a few days. Transfer or deposit €1,000 or more, hold your funds for 90 days on the exchange and make one trade. And that's only it. That's what you need to do. And the more you're active and the more you do or the more you deposit, the more you can earn. And based on that amount, the reward will be transferred into your account. Why should you switch towards OKX? Well, OKX offers the lowest trading fees, real proof of reserves. They are having the MiCA license in Europe, and they have advanced tools like trading tools and bots on the website. And they have the Web3 integration, so you can trade on DEXs within the same ecosystem. So it's built for anyone, for beginners, serious traders, and advanced traders, and it's fully available in the Netherlands. So if you're ready to upgrade your trading experience, head to the link below in the description beneath and join the transfer days at OKX. Let's go. Ultimately, we simply don't know when the markets are going to be turning into an altcoin fiesta. What we do know is that Ethereum provides more strength versus Bitcoin, and that we are moving into an Ethereum market. And if we remember the money flow cycle, you have Bitcoin, then it goes into Ethereum. Ethereum needs to show strength, which means that Ethereum needs to do another leg upwards. And then the money starts to rotate into more riskier assets, or people tend to go into the risk curve, which is the money flow of the crypto cycle, and then altcoins start to do well. It's a good sign that Ethereum is outperforming. The likelihood of the approval of ETFs is going to be pushing it forward, as people are going to be seeing staking being included into the Ethereum ETF, which should fuel more momentum into the markets, and that could spark the next rally for the entire market. Now, what we need to keep in mind is the macroeconomic environment in the upcoming period. If that remains the same, it's definitely not going to happen. But if it's going to be slightly improved, it's going to give a big push into the entire markets, into riskier assets, into altcoins. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again on the next updates in the upcoming week. Ciao.